We're going to practice drawing the eye from these 3 different angles. Each of them has a slightly different value change as well, so this is important to practice shading in the eye focused on value with lights and darks. So to get started, we're going to be filling in this value scale, which goes from dark to light, along with all of those medium tones. So make sure that you shade that in with whatever material you're using to practice drawing the eyes with. And as I'm shading this in, I'm holding the pencil on the side rather than using the tip of the pencil to shade. And I'm holding the back of the pencil as well as I'm shading, as this will help to really blend your layers and smooth things out and make it not as choppy. The first thing I'm going to do is break up both the reference picture and my rectangle that I'm going to draw in into these 4 sections. So I'm putting these dashed lines that split everything up in half horizontally and vertically. This is somewhat similar to a grid drawing where I'm going to be comparing where, first of all, the inside of the tear duct lines up. So that's about halfway along that top line, and comparing it to my drawing. So the outside of the eye, same thing, lines up about halfway between the dash that I drew and the edge of the box. So now I'm going to be continuing to measure things out, compare where everything is in each of those 4 quadrants. So I'm going to be looking at the outside of the eyes, the bottom and the top of the eyes, seeing where those line up compared to those dashed lines that I have. So just extending my line out. And then I'm basically, once I have all of this outlined, going to be connecting the dots. So I'm taking my outline of where the tear duct starts, where the top of the eye is, the outside of the eye, and the bottom of the eye. And then I'm really going to be looking at my reference picture and outlining the eye, still keeping it simple. So I'm starting with simple shapes here, using my pencil here to outline around where the top of the eye lines up. Really looking at the angle of things and continuing to compare each quadrant, what I see, thinking of it again somewhat like a grid drawing where I'm looking at each of these 4 grid sections. Now I'm coming around towards the bottom of the eye, connecting that to the tear duct. So again, I'm keeping everything as simple as possible at first. And now I'm just continuing to refine the shape and build off of it, looking at where the top of the eye is, where the iris and the pupil are inside of the eye. I'm lightly outlining highlights and shadows, so I outline the highlight in the eye. And now I'm looking at where the eyebrow is, lightly blacking that in. Again, comparing where it starts and stops with the quadrants and the lines that I have. Now I'm just lightly outlining the rest of those highlights and shadows, and you'll start to see it coming together as I get all of those details blacked in. Now I'm going in with a light value in the darkest areas. If you squint your eyes, the darkest areas should pop out to you right away, and I would start there just lightly layering those in. Again, as you're shading, hold your pencil on the back and use the side of the pencil to shade with versus the point. I'm continuing to shade in the iris, the pupil, and then I'm going to be building my layers as I go. Every once in a while, flip your picture upside down. This will help to make certain areas really stand out to you that you need to go back and adjust as you're working. As I get more values blacked in, I'm slowly starting to bring in some details. So right now I'm working on some details in the eyebrow, looking at the shading around the outside of the face, continuing to really darken those darkest values and bring in some of the medium tones as I go. At this point, I flip the reference picture back around, so some other areas that need adjusted or values that need blacked in will jump out to you right away. So every once in a while, just continue to flip and rotate your reference picture as you're working so you can see values and shapes that are actually there versus taking a guess as to what you think is there. Remember with the eyebrows and eyelashes to really look at those little details. Look at your reference picture and don't just take a guess at where they are and what the shapes are. Now I'm moving into the second eye here. Same thing, I'm blacking in my 4 lines to create a quadrant. I outline where the top, sides, and bottom of the eye are, and I'm blacking in where the eyebrow is and starting to outline those small details first. And then I'm outlining highlights and areas of shadow as well. And then I'll go in with a light value to begin shading in those darkest places. So squint your eyes to see where those darkest values are. Blacken a dark value on top of the eyebrow, where the nose meets the eye here. So even though we're focused on practicing to draw the eye, it's important to shade and draw what's around it as well. There are a lot of details and a lot of values around the eye that will make the eye fit into the face and make it look like the person you're drawing. So very important to practice these details and highlights and shadow around the eye to see how they work and come together. So I'm continuing to bring in a little bit more detail as I go, flipping the reference picture upside down to see the value change a little bit more accurately, and continuing to really layer those darkest values so I can bring in the medium tones as well. Using a kneadable eraser is a great way to block in some of the highlights as you are finishing up. So I would do that as almost one of your last steps. Bring in a kneadable eraser, or really any eraser that you can use a lot of detail with, and start to erase away those lightest highlights to make it stand out. And then here is the last example of the eye. So break that up into your 4 sections. Outline around the outside of the eye, get those details slowly blocked in. Look for the highlights on the eye. That's very important to include. Really look at the shape of the eyebrow. Looking at positive versus negative space will help as you start to outline these areas. So not only looking at the shape that the eyebrow makes, but what shape is under the eyebrow and the eye making. So it's almost a triangular shape that you can look at and try to repeat in your drawing based off of that reference picture. So again, squint your eyes, really build layers, make those darkest values as dark as you can so you can have a full range of medium tones in between. Just slowly build layers and add details as you're working.